It started with light and fire in the sky above Vega Prime. The air trembled as Captain Ethan Cole's small ship entered the planet's upper atmosphere. He had not planned to land there. His mission was simple, to scout a nearby sector for signs of pirate activity. But fate has its own strange humor, and fate chose to laugh that day. A sudden wave of energy struck his ship from behind. The warning lights flashed red across the cockpit. The engine struggled and died. Ethan pulled every lever, pressed every button, but the ship only spun faster. The planet's surface rushed up to meet him. He gritted his teeth, guided the ship with the last trace of power, and braced for the crash. The sound was terrible when he hit the ground. Metal screeched, glass shattered, and the night exploded with sparks. When everything stopped, Ethan opened his eyes and tasted smoke. The ship was broken badly, one side buried in the soft red dust of Vega Prime's valley. He crawled out coughing, his uniform torn, his shoulder bruised. The air was warm, almost sweet, filled with the scent of rain on faraway winds. Then he saw it. A huge column of smoke rose not far away. He blinked twice, realizing it was another crash, bigger, brighter, and much worse. He ran toward it. The cracked visor of his helmet caught the reflection of the burning wreck. Pieces of a royal convoy lay scattered across the plain. Armor plates glowed like coals, and small fires moved like red snakes on the ground. He moved without thinking. Training and instinct guided every step. He checked the first vehicle empty, and the second overturned but no one inside. Then he heard a sound, soft and full of pain, coming from behind a large section of debris. Ethan rushed toward it. There, trapped under a twisted piece of transport metal, was a young woman in royal clothing. Her light blue dress was torn, her golden crown broken at the edge. Her eyes were open but dim with shock and dust. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her. "Stay still," he said firmly. "You are going to be fine. I'll get you out." Her lips moved, barely forming words. The explosion. "Others. Gone. I'll take care of it," Ethan said. He looked over the wreck. The metal was heavy. One end jammed into the ground, and the ground itself cracked beneath it. The engines of the ruined vehicle hissed, leaking thick smoke. He heard something that made his stomach twist, the faint ticking of a damaged fuel core. It could blow at any second. He tried pulling on the wreckage first, but it was no use. His boots slipped in the dust. He needed more leverage. He found a long rod of bent steel, jammed it under the wreck, and pushed with his whole body. His muscles burned, his vision blurred. Inch by inch the wreck shifted. The girl gasped as her leg came free. "Can you move?" "Yes," she whispered, and he knew she was lying, the kind of brave lie foolish people say when they want to seem strong. He didn't argue. He leaned down, slipped one arm under her back, another under her knees, and lifted her carefully. She was light, cold, and trembling. He carried her away from the wreck, his boots sinking into the soft dust. Behind them came a low Rortha, leaking fuel core, finally gave in. The wreck exploded in a flash so bright it turned the whole valley white for a moment. Fire rolled over the ground and wind pushed at his back. Ethan kept walking. He reached a small rise covered with scattered rocks and laid her down gently. She was breathing hard but alive. He looked at her ankle. It was swollen and bloody, twisted the wrong way. He tore a strip from his own sleeve and made a quick bandage to stop the bleeding. The girl looked at him, her eyes sharp despite the pain. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "Ethan Cole, Terran Navy you are." "Human." He smiled faintly. "Last time I checked." She tried to return the smile but winced instead. "I am Princess Lara of the Royal House of Valerian," she said. Her voice, even broken and dusty, carried the weight of command. He nodded as if she had told him her name was Lara and nothing more. "Well, Princess Lara, we're going to get you home. I just need a way to call for help." He looked toward the distance where tiny towers glimmered at the edge of twilight. They sat in silence for a while, surrounded by the cooling wind and the soft crackle of fire behind them. Above them, the stars slowly returned to their places, shining cold and steady. That moment, simple as it was, marked the first quiet breath in a story that would shake kingdoms and unite two worlds. Ethan did not know it yet. He only knew that he had done what he always did, save the one person he could, even when everything else was burning. That night, as rescue lights blinked across the sky, the man from Earth carried the royal princess towards safety. Step by step, unaware that his life had already changed forever, Ethan woke up to the sound of quiet footsteps and the soft hum of machines. For a moment he thought he was back on a medical ship, but when his eyes opened fully, he saw glass walls filled with bright sunlight-colored curtains that moved gently with the breeze, and rows of servants walking silently across the polished floor. He realized he was in a palace, not a hospital. He tried to move, but his shoulder protested with a sharp pain. A nurse hurried over and asked him politely to stay still. She said, "You are safe, Captain. The princess told us everything. The king himself asked that you be treated as a guest of great honor." Ethan blinked, still trying to understand. He had never imagined he would end up in a royal palace. He had planned to fix his ship and be back on duty within days. Yet now, through the open window, he saw rows of silver towers, green gardens, and guards wearing bright armor. The city below looked like it had been built out of light itself, he remembered Lara. At once he sat up. "The princess," he said. "Where is she?" "She is safe," the nurse said with a smile. "She asked to speak with you once you are ready." Later that morning, 2 guards led him to a large chamber at the top of the palace. The doors opened with a soft sound, and Ethan stepped into a room that glowed with sunlight. At the far end sat King Roland, a tall man with a gray beard and eyes that seemed to see through stone. Beside him stood Princess Lara, her ankle bandaged, her dress simple but elegant. She looked different from the frightened girl he had carried through fire. Now she looked strong again, calm and graceful. Ethan bowed low, not sure how deep was proper, but doing his best. The king watched him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You are the one who saved my daughter's life," the king said slowly. His voice was deep, the kind that seemed to fill the whole hall without effort. "Yes, your majesty," Ethan said quietly. "I was nearby when her convoy crashed." The king studied him. "And you are human from the Terran Federation?" "Sir." The king's eyes softened for a moment. "Then I owe much to your people," he said. "You risked your life when my finest guards failed." Ethan shook his head quickly. "I did what anyone would do, sir." The king's lips curved slightly.
"Oh, he said you did what a good man would do?"
He looked at Lara, who met his gaze firmly. "My daughter owes you her life. It is a debt that cannot be ignored." Ethan felt uneasy. He never liked being thanked too much, especially by people who looked like they could buy a small country with one gesture. He wanted to say something polite and simple, but the king was already speaking again. "As our law commands," the king said carefully, "a life saved from certain death by another binds the 2 families. It is our ancient code of honor. There is only one way to balance such a debt." He looked directly at Ethan. "You shall marry my daughter." The room went silent. It was so quiet that Ethan could hear his own heartbeat. Looked at the king, then at Lara, thinking he must have misunderstood. But the king's face was serious, and Lara looked as surprised as he was. "Your Majesty," Ethan said, trying to find the right words. "I'm grateful for your kindness, but I can't this as well. I'm a soldier, not royalty." The king raised a hand. "It is not a choice, Captain. It is the law of our house." Lara took a step forward, her voice quick and full of protest. "Father, this is madness. You cannot decide such things for me." Her father turned his gaze to her. "You know, our law, Lara, this man placed his life above yours. The old code binds you both." Ethan could see that she wanted to shout but held herself still. He, too, stood frozen, unsure what a soldier was supposed to do when a king offered his daughter's hand like a medal. The meeting ended with confusion and tension. Ethan was taken back to his guest room, while the king's council began secret talks. Servants whispered in corners, their eyes full of curiosity about the strange human who had caught the attention of their rulers. That evening, Lara came to see him. She stood by the door for a moment before speaking. "I am sorry," she said softly. "My father is kind, but old-fashioned. He believes in the old ways." Ethan shrugged lightly. "It's fine. I didn't expect anything like this, but I'll find a way to settle it without making trouble." She smiled faintly. "You don't seem afraid. I've been through worse," he said with a small grin. For the first time since the crash, she laughed, a clear and warm sound that made the room feel different. "You really are unusual, Captain," she said. "Save my life, fall from the sky, argue with my father, and now you stand there as if nothing is wrong. Maybe I'm just tired, Ethan said. She looked at him for a moment longer. Maybe, she said softly, and then turned to leave. When the door closed, Ethan stood in silence and stared out the window. The royal city shimmered below, full of golden lights and music rising from the streets. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that whatever happened next, nothing in his life would ever be ordinary again. The morning after the king announced that Ethan and Lara must marry, the palace was in an uproar. Servants whispered in every hallway. Courtiers traded rumors like coins. Some said it was a clever political move. Others called it madness. A human soldier marrying their royal princess was something their people had never imagined. Ethan sat in his guest room, still trying to understand everything that had happened. He looked out over the palace gardens, where the fountains danced in the sunlight, and noble families walked among the flowers. It was peaceful, but inside his mind, there was only noise. He had faced battles, storms, and empty space, but nothing had prepared him for this. He was a soldier. He followed orders, repaired engines, and led rescue teams, knew how to survive a war. But royal rules, ancient laws, and marriage proposals from kings were things far beyond his training. A quiet knock came at the door. When he opened it, Lara was standing there. She still walked carefully because of her injured ankle, but her eyes were bright with energy. "Captain," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Or should I start calling you something else, since my father now sees you as my future husband?" Ethan gave a small laugh that was more tired than amused. "Let's not start that talk again, princess. I don't even know how this happened." Lara stepped into the room, her expression serious but curious. "It happened because my father believes that debts must be repaid. He still rules by the old code, no matter how much the world has changed. Can't he just give me a medal?" Ethan asked. That would make both of our lives easier." She almost smiled. "He thinks medals fade, but marriage lasts." Then she sighed. "You saved me from the wreck that killed my guards. My father sees that as more than a rescue. To him, it is destiny." "Destiny," Ethan repeated quietly. He leaned on the table near the window and looked outside. "Where I come from, people choose their own destiny." There was silence for a moment. The sound of the fountains reached them faintly. "Finally," Lara said, "I will not marry someone because of a rule written 100 years ago. I want to decide what my life will be, no matter what my father says." She straightened her back and looked at Ethan. "And I think you feel the same." He nodded. "Yes. I came here because fate threw my ship out of the sky, not because I wanted to win a throne." That small moment of shared understanding started something between them. For the next few days, they met often in the palace gardens or in the royal library. They walked among the tall trees, talking not like a princess and a soldier, but like two people trying to make sense of a story written for them by others. Lara asked questions about life on Earth. Ethan told her about oceans that stretched farther than sight, about cities that glowed with lights through the night, about music that came from real instruments made of wood and steel. She listened closely, her eyes shining with wonder. In return, she told him about her planet, ruled from the Palace of Sunlight, where her people valued order and tradition. She explained how hard it was to change anything when her father believed every old rule was sacred. The more they talked, the more Ethan began to understand her strength. She had been born into a golden cage, yet she carried herself with quiet defiance. He saw that she wasn't spoiled, as he had first feared. She was intelligent, brave, and as stubborn as any soldier he had ever met. Soon, laughter began to replace the tension between them. One morning, while walking by the gardens, Lara asked him to teach her how to use the small communicator he carried. She pressed random buttons and somehow managed to trigger a loud distress call that echoed across the palace guard's channel. Ethan quickly turned it off, and they both burst out laughing as alarms started ringing in the distance. "You may have started a minor emergency," he said with a grin. "Well," she said, lifting her chin proudly, "you can blame your bad instructions." Moments like that softened the pressure they both felt. Still, every few days, royal advisors came to speak with the king, pushing the matter of the wedding. Ethan knew he could not delay forever. Then one evening, while the sky burned orange over the towers, the king sent for them both. They entered the grand hall once more. The king looked tired but firm. "I have given you time," the king said. Now, I must know your answer. The law of life debt cannot be ignored. My people expect a union that will honor our house. Lara stepped forward. Father, this law was made to keep peace in violent times, not to chain your daughter's future. The king frowned. You speak as if gratitude is a burden. Ethan spoke quietly. Your Majesty, I owe your country respect, and your daughter my promise to protect her. Dud. But forcing a marriage will bring no peace, only resentment. The king's eyes were grave. You both misunderstand. This is not only about law or pride. The people already know of your act. They see hope in this bond between you, humans and our world working side by side. Together, you could unite us in peace. Neither Ethan nor Lara spoke. They knew the king was not wrong. Rumors had already spread across the planet. Pictures of Ethan carrying Lara through fire were everywhere. To the people, it was already a legend of courage and love. That night, after leaving the hall, Lara and Ethan stood on the palace balcony. The stars shined high above. Do you ever feel, she said softly, that the whole world is deciding your story for you? Ethan looked at her and said, yes, but stories can change, even when they start the wrong way. She smiled at that. It was a small smile, but it stayed with him long after she left. Even though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew that something new had begun to grow between them, something real, quietly born under the weight of expectation, but stronger than either of them had planned. Days turned into weeks as Ethan stayed in the royal city. The talk of marriage between him and Princess Lara spread everywhere. Every cafe, every market, and every home discussed it. Some people loved the idea of their princess joining with a man from another world. Others whispered that it was wrong, that he was a stranger who did not belong in their royal line. Ethan hated the gossip, but he ignored it and focused on helping rebuild the convoy system that had been destroyed in the crash. Lara spent her days beside him, working to make sure her father's rule stayed stable. She organized aid for the villages near the crash site, visited families who had lost loved ones, and spoke to the people with calm and kind words. Ethan could see how much her people respected her. She was gentle with them, but strong when it mattered. They worked well together. Ethan took care of the technical problems, while Lara dealt with people. She told the workers stories to raise their spirits, and when she laughed, it seemed to make everyone's day brighter. Ethan had never expected to care this much about another world, but her determination made him care. He wanted to help not because of duty, but because of her. Yet not everyone wanted peace. There were others who saw danger in the idea of the king's daughter marrying a human man. Some powerful men in the council feared that humans might slowly take control of their planet through this union. A small circle of them began to plan in secret. They spread false stories that the human captain had destroyed the convoy himself to gain fame. They spread fear to turn people against him. One night, Ethan was in the palace command room fixing a broken communication relay when a soldier burst in, panic on his face. Captain, he said, there's been a cyber attack on the defense grid. Somebody is trying to shut down our early warning system. Ethan jumped up, his eyes sharp.
Show me.
The soldier led him to the main screen. A stream of code was flashing red across it. Someone from outside was trying to take control of the city's shields. If they succeeded, the capital would be open to attack. Within minutes, Lara entered the room, wearing a formal robe, but looking ready for battle. What is happening? She asked. Ethan explained quickly. Someone's trying to take the defense system offline. If they manage to get through, we'll have no protection. And judging from the signal, they're using royal access codes. She froze. That means it's someone inside the palace. He nodded. I think so. But whoever it is, they're not just trying to cause trouble. This looks like a military-level operation. Together, they began to work through the systems. Ethan's fingers moved quickly across the controls, while Lara contacted trusted guards to secure the palace entrances. Within minutes, they had blocked part of the attack, but not all of it. Ethan realized that the enemy was using one of the old satellites above the planet to keep control of the signals. I need to disable that uplink, but it can only be done manually, Ethan said. Lara looked at him. It means you'll have to go out there. He nodded again. It's fine. I've done worse jobs. You just make sure the king is safe while I'm gone. She wanted to argue, but she saw the calm in his eyes and understood. He left the room with a small salute and sprinted through the palace corridors toward the hangar.
Out.
Within minutes, he took a fast scout ship into orbit and located the satellite. The stars around him looked cold and distant. He docked with the old machine, moved through the tight metal corridors, found the device sending out fake orders to the palace network. His hands worked fast as alarms echoed in his ears. Back on the planet, the palace shook as ground forces loyal to the conspirators made their move. They attacked the royal gates, hoping to take the king hostage while the city defenses were down. Lara refused to hide. She took a communication headset and began directing loyal guards to block the intruders. Her calm voice kept the soldiers steady, even as explosions sounded outside. Meanwhile, Ethan finished his task and destroyed the satellite's control unit. The fake signals vanished from the palace screens. He shouted into the radio, "It's done, Lara. The city's shields are back online." Lara's relief lasted only a second, because the door to the command room burst open. A group of rebels stormed in. She stood her ground, facing them with her head held high. "You do not belong here," she said firmly. "We belong more than a human does," one of them spat back. They raised their weapons. Before they could act, the sound of engines roared outside the window. Ethan's ship came down fast, landing near the balcony. Smoke covered the floor. Ethan stepped through it, holding a pulse blaster and eyes full of fire. The rebels froze in shock at the sight of him. Within seconds, the guards followed, pushing the rebels to the ground and taking them prisoner. When it was over, Lara walked toward Ethan, her dress torn and her face covered with ash. "You came back right on time again," she said breathlessly. Ethan smiled faintly. Seems like a habit. The king entered the room then, safe but shaken. He looked at Ethan, at his daughter, and then at the rebels being dragged away. "You saved us again, Captain," he said. His voice was quiet but full of pride. Ethan said nothing. He only looked at Lara, who smiled at him through the dust and smoke. They both knew that whatever bond had begun between them, it was now much deeper than before. It was no longer just a matter of law or gratitude. It was trust earned in fire and war. That night, the city lights glowed brighter than ever. The people celebrated their safety. In the palace tower, Ethan and Lara stood side by side watching the sky. Neither of them spoke, but their hearts said what words could not. Something truly powerful had begun to grow, something that even the stars would remember. The royal city slowly returned to peace after the attack. The broken gates were repaired, the rebels were taken away, and the people began to live without fear again. But things were not the same. Everywhere Ethan went, people bowed or called him a hero. They told stories of how he came from the sky and saved their princess not once, but twice. Children played games pretending to be him. Merchants sold small carvings of him carrying the princess from fire. Ethan did not like all the attention. He wanted life to be quiet again. He wanted to fix his ship and go back to his duties. Yet deep inside, he knew he had become part of something bigger than himself. And every day when he saw Lara walking through the gardens or talking with her people, he felt that leaving would no longer be simple. The king called him to the throne room one bright morning. The hall was full of nobles, soldiers, and council members. Everyone began to whisper when Ethan entered. The king stood and raised his hand for silence. "Captain Ethan Cole," the king said, his voice calm and strong. "You have not only saved my daughter, but you have saved my kingdom. I once offered my daughter's hand to you because of law and duty. And now, I offer it because you truly deserve her." The hall was silent. Lara stood beside her father, her face calm, but her eyes were full of something soft, something honest. The king turned to her. "Daughter, do you accept this bond, not by law, but by your own heart?" Lara looked at Ethan. For a moment, the world around them faded. She remembered the fire, the smoke, the endless nights of rebuilding, and the sound of his voice giving her courage when fear filled her heart. "I do," she said quietly. The people gasped, and then cheers rang through the hall. Ethan felt the sound swell around him like a wave he could not escape. He opened his mouth, unsure of what to say, but then he saw her smile. It was small and real. Knew what his answer already was. "I will honor her," he said firmly. "Not as a prize, but as my equal." The king nodded proudly. "Then it shall be done." Let this day mark the union of courage and grace, of two worlds joining as one. The royal celebration began that night. The entire city came alive with lights and music. Long tables were set with food from every province, and banners waved in the evening wind. People danced on the wide marble streets, and music filled the air until the stars rose high above. Ethan stood on the palace balcony, wearing a simple blue coat the king had given him. He was never one for royal clothes, but even he had to admit the view of the glowing city was beautiful. Lara stepped up beside him, her silver dress shining faintly in the starlight. He smiled at her. "So this is what peace looks like," she laughed. "Now, but peace must be protected as strongly as we protect ourselves." He nodded. "Then I guess that's our next mission." They walked through the hall together, greeting their guests. People thanked Ethan again and again. The king's advisors, once doubtful, now bowed with respect. The young men of the guard saluted him with pride. Ethan felt humbled, but also at home, something he had not felt since long before the crash. Later that night, when the crowd began to fade and the music softened, Lada and Ethan walked alone in the quiet royal gardens. The air smelled of fresh flowers and night rain. "Did you ever think," Lada said, "that your crash from the sky would end with all this?" He shook his head with a smile. "Not a chance. I just wanted to survive and fix my ship. I never thought I'd find you or this world or this life." She looked at him for a long moment. And now he turned toward the glowing horizon where the first light of dawn touched the palace towers. "Now," he said softly, "I think I finally found where I'm meant to be." They stood together watching the sunrise. The city below began to wake slowly, golden lights flickering as the people returned to their lives. Somewhere in the early morning breeze, the bells of celebration started again. Weeks passed after the wedding. The royal newspapers called their story a new legend. They called it HumanMight, saying it was proof that courage and kindness could change the fate of worlds. Ethan never liked the title much, but Lara said it fit him perfectly. Under their rule, peace grew stronger between worlds. Lara led with wisdom, while Ethan served as commander of the royal defense, teaching young soldiers the value of bravery and mercy. Together they rebuilt what had been lost and shaped a new age of understanding. Sometimes, when the palace grew too busy, they would slip away from court duties and take long rides beyond the city walls. They rode to the same valley where Ethan's ship had crashed, where they had first met through fire and smoke. Grass now covered the ground where the wreck once lay, and wildflowers grew in the soft wind. Standing there one evening, Lara turned to him and said quietly, "So this is where our story truly began." He smiled. "Yes, right here in the ashes." She took his hand. Then it was a good beginning. He looked up at the sky, filled with stars that seemed brighter than ever before. "It was," he said, "and it's only the beginning." The wind moved softly through the grass, carrying with it the sound of distant laughter from the city below. The two of them stood side by side, no longer a soldier and a princess, but partners who had changed the shape of history through courage, trust, and something even stronger than duty. And as the stars shone down on them, their story born of chance, tested by fire, and sealed by love, became the light that would guide generations to come.